Oh dear, it looks like Cuthbert is really stuck this time. In previous tutorials, you've edited the scene to help Connie reach Cuthbert. But this time, you'll be editing Connie herself, supercharging her with some new abilities to get past the obstacles in the scene. Bear in mind that this is a complex tutorial in which it's easy to make a mistake. If you do, remember to use the left directional button to undo. Now go into play mode and see how far you can get. Possess Connie with R2 and press the X button to jump. Oops, she can't even get over the first obstacle. So let's start by souping up her jump height. Switch back to edit mode and we'll get started. To change Connie's jump height, all we need to do is tweak her. So hover over her, hold L1 and press the square button to open her tweak menu. This is a puppet tweak menu. As you can see, it's jam-packed with different options. Thankfully, the setting we want is on the first page. All these settings control Connie's overall movement. We could make Connie run super fast or super slow. But nah, that's not going to help her. A nice high jump is what we need. What do we have here? This slider controls Connie's jump height. Hover over it with your imp and hold X to grab it. Move your imp to adjust the slider to around 3 meters. That should be enough to get over that stack of blocks. The Puppet Tweak menu also has some really useful testing controls. Click R3 to start time, and Connie will come to life. See what happens now if you hover your imp over the jump height slider. You can preview the jump, so you can get it to the perfect height without having to test it in play mode. Actually, I think you should dial it back to 2.5 meters, or she might overshoot the jump. You can make small adjustments to sliders by using the up and down directional buttons. Hover over the slider and use the down directional button to adjust the setting. Feel free to explore some of the other settings in the menu. If you're not sure what a button or slider does, just hover over it for a few seconds and a more info tip will pop up to explain. You can even adjust the strength of gravity on her jump. Turn it down a bit to make her jump more floaty. When you've got Connie's jump the way you want it, give it a test run in play mode. See how far Connie can get now, then move on to the next step when you're ready to continue. Well, that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, Connie's new jumping skills aren't going to be much use on the next obstacle. And don't even think about making her jump over the top, because that force field will zap her in a second. Instead, let's give Connie the power to crouch. I bet she's always dreamed of it. If you're still in play mode, switch back to edit mode now. Rewind time with L3 to put Connie back at the start. To give her a crouch, we need to scope into her. Puppets are made up of sculptures, connectors, and gadgets that are grouped together. Hover over Connie, press and hold L1, then press X to scope in. When you've scoped into a puppet, you can see its inner workings. On Connie's back, there's a microchip gadget. It's called Connie's brain, and it contains all her logic and animations. Let's take a look inside. Hold L1 and press X over it to scope in and open the microchip canvas. There's quite a lot going on in here. The gadget I want you to look at is this one in the bottom right corner with the diamond icon. This is a keyframe gadget. If you've played through the Keyframes and Timelines tutorial, you'll already know all about these. Keyframes record changes to things in the scene. They store those changes in a gadget, which can be triggered using logic. This keyframe contains a crouching pose for Connie. Select the keyframe with X, and you'll see a preview of how it looks. Those dashed lines over Connie show that she's being changed by the keyframe. Press circle to deselect the keyframe, and she goes back to normal. To be able to activate the crouch keyframe, we need to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. Then you'll be able to make her crouch with a controller button. In the next step, I'll show you how to do exactly that. To activate the crouch, we're going to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. If you've closed her microchip, scope back into her and then scope into the microchip to open it up again. The controller sensor is the large gadget on Connie's microchip. It has a controller icon on it. Open up its tweak menu with L1 and square. Now you have a microchip and a tweak menu open, you may need to arrange them on the screen. Make sure that the controller sensor and its tweak menu stay to the left. This is because they generate signals, and signals flow through gadgets from left to right in Dreams. You can also save the 3D space position of tweak menus and microchips, or pin them to the screen, using the buttons that appear at the top when hovering over the canvas. This will help you keep them tidy while you're editing logic, which is very important as it's easy to make mistakes. Now, let's take a closer look at that controller sensor. Ah, look, controller buttons. Just what we need. All playable characters contain a controller sensor gadget like this one. But the gadget can also be used for any situation where you want to detect button presses. To assign our keyframe to a button, we just need to wire it to the controller sensor. We won't use a circle button as that depossesses Connie, and X makes her jump. So how about the square button to crouch? Make sure you can see the keyframe on the microchip. Move the tweak menu with R2 if you need to. If you hover over the square button in the controller sensor menu, you'll see ports appear on either side of it. They're just like the ports you see on gadgets. Ports on the left are inputs, and ports on the right are outputs. Now, you need to be very precise for the next part, as it's easy to make a mistake. Carefully hover your imp over the output port of the square button, and press X to create a wire. Stretch that wire over to the keyframe, and connect it to the power port on the bottom of the gadget with X. If at any time you make a mistake, just undo it using the left directional button. Once your crouch move is all wired up, close the controller sensor tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1, then press circle to close. Now try out Connie's new crouch in play mode. See if she can make it under the second obstacle. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and start the next step. Right, we're on to the final obstacle. There's no way around it, but it looks destructible. So we're going to make a slam attack for Connie so that she can smash through it. We'll start by recording a pose for the slam. We can do this using a keyframe. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip if it isn't already open. If you've played my Keyframes and Timelines tutorial, you'll have a bit of a head start on this next part. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Animate menu. Select the keyframe with X. You'll now have a keyframe gadget on your imp. Stamp it somewhere in the scene with R2 or X. The keyframe records changes you make to objects and settings in the scene. It starts recording as soon as you stamp it. You can tell it's recording because your imp will change shape and colour. Now that we're recording, grab Connie's upper body with R2 and drag it gently down to the floor. Because we're scoped into her, we can move her body parts individually to create a pose. If we weren't scoped in, we'd move Connie's whole body. Notice that her knees automatically bend. Make sure her cone is all the way down to the floor so that you can't see her legs. Keyframes can record changes to anything, even tweak menu settings. So, just for visual flair, let's also make her glow. Hover over Connie's cone, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Because we're scoped in, this opens the tweak menu for the sculpture itself, rather than the puppet. All the settings on this page change the way Connie's cone looks. Look for the glow slider on the first page. Its icon is a sun. Raise the glow up to about 40%. Once you've set the glow, select Stop Recording in the context menu to store the changes to the keyframe. You can close the tweak menu now too. Just hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. Select the keyframe gadget with X to preview what's been recorded. Looks good. Deselect the keyframe by pressing circle. In the next step, we'll continue building Connie's slam attack. The next step is to place our new Connie animation into a timeline. Using a timeline will let us time the animations and effects of the slam attack. Go to the Assembly menu and back to the Animate menu. Select the timeline with X. Hover over Connie's microchip and stamp a timeline above the crouch keyframe. Now let's open the timeline canvas with L1 and X. The slam attack should be a really quick animation. So adjust the canvas so it's only 1 second long. Any longer and it won't feel snappy enough. Hover over the edge of the timeline canvas so that a white line appears along it. You'll also see a white double-ended arrow appear next to the edge by your imp. When you see this, grab the edge of the canvas with X. Move your imp to shorten the timeline to 1 second. Make sure you don't select the trim button by mistake. It's a square button by the numbers at the top of the timeline. It has a black arrow on it. The timeline duration is now correct, but the space is very small. So let's zoom in a bit. Hover your imp over the timeline canvas, hold L1 and press the right directional button to zoom in. This will keep the timeline duration to 1 second long, but stretch the space so that you can fit more detail into it. If you need to zoom out, just hold L1 and press the left directional button. Now let's put our slam attack keyframe onto the timeline. Grab the keyframe with R2 and place it at the start of the timeline canvas. Make sure you've got the slam keyframe and not the crouch one. The gadget automatically snaps to the surface of the canvas. The keyframe is only a fraction of a second long at the moment, but we need it to fill the length of the timeline. So hover over the keyframe and hold the up directional button to scale it. Make it the same length as the timeline. Now we want to wire the timeline up to a button press, just like we did with the crouch. Move the timeline canvas so that you can see the controller sensor and the timeline gadget. Open the controller sensor tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the slam attack button. Hover over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's slam attack. Give it a try in play mode. At the moment, it's just an animation, so it's not going to do anything to the blocks. But in the next step, I'll show you how to add some force to it. When you're ready to continue, return to edit mode, rewind time, and start the next step. The slam attack animation is all set up, but it's not doing much besides looking cool, so we need to add a gadget to our timeline that will emit a force when Connie slams the ground. The gadget we're going to use for this is the force applier. Go to the assembly menu and open the gadgets menu. Find the move as an output menu and open it with X. The icon for the force applier looks like a gust of wind. Select it with X to equip it to your imp. I hope you've still got the timeline open. If not, open it with L1 and X. Stamp the force applier onto the timeline canvas below the keyframe. Press circle to unequip the force applier from your imp. The force applier isn't very strong by default, so we'll need to tweak it. To open its tweak menu, hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square. At the top of the tweak menu is the force strength slider. Its icon is a beefy arm. Drag it all the way up to 100% using your imp. That will ensure the force emitted will overcome the gravity in the scene and the friction between the blocks. Next, increase the force speed to 10 meters per second. That will give the slam attack some punch. If you take a look at Connie, you'll see a green zone around her. Anything in this zone will be affected by the force applier. At the moment, the zone isn't much bigger than Connie. Hover your imp over the zone and arrow gizmos will appear. Grab them with R2 and move your imp to change the size of the zone. Or you can scale the zone more precisely in the force applier tweak menu. Go to the tab called Zone Size. Grab the zone size slider with X and set it to about 3.5 meters. Okay, let's test out Connie's new powers. Switch over to play mode. Possess Connie and give her new slam attack a try. Oops! Looks like it's more power than Connie can handle. The force applier is pushing her off the platform. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time. In the final step, I'll show you how to tweak the force applier so that it only affects the objects we want it to. To prevent the force applier from pushing Connie off the platforms, we're going to use labels. Labels can be given to any object in the scene, and gadgets like the force applier can detect them. In the force applier tweak menu, go to the Labels tab. By default, it will detect all labels. There are labels for all sorts of objects: foes, scenery, targets. The friend label is used for playable characters like Connie or friendly characters like Cuthbert. So if we deselect it, the force applier will no longer affect Connie. hover over the friend button and press X to deselect it. It's the button with the heart icon. Now Connie should be able to blast through the blocks without firing herself off into space. Use her new skills to pass all the obstacles. And you can use your new skills to create some characters for your scenes. When you've successfully rescued Cuthbert, go through the door to finish this tutorial.